Well, it says that China has so effectively kneecapped the institutions of the United Nations that the UN can't even debate its own report into human rights abuses in the Uyghur region. It's really showing that China's soft power, that its development through the Belt and Road Initiative has been so effective, diplomatically speaking, that they can't be held to account for their human rights abuses.
Were you surprised by the decision?
Honestly, I was surprised that it was so close. I mean, every time that nations have tried to bring the Uyghur issue before the Human Rights Council, they've lost the vote. And they've lost the vote for precisely the same reason, that China has so much clout through the nations of the United Nations now. So I was surprised that it was so close, but exceptionally disappointed as well that it was so close and that we had some very surprise abstentions. For example, Ukraine, who, knowing that China has totally failed to condemn what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, you would have expected Ukraine to side with justice here, but they didn't.
Now, this is just the second time in the Council's history that a motion like this has been rejected. It's being called a setback for the United Nations as a whole and an adjustment away from Western predominance when it comes to human rights. Is that an accurate description?
I'm not sure that the last part of that is accurate. I don't think anybody wants a pivot away to the values of the Chinese Communist Party. I think what it represents is that, the United Nations has got to get real about what China has been doing and how it's been developing its influence. And it has to get real about the fact that if it can't hold nations like the People's Republic of China to account for interning well over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, then what's the point in it? Clearly, there is an urgent need for reform in the way that the institutions of the United Nations functions.
Now, this was supposed to be a debate about the abuse of Uyghur Muslims. So why did several Muslim countries reject this motion?
So the received wisdom would be that China's very heavy influence and investment in a lot of the Islamic world, but beyond as well, through the Belt and Road Initiative scheme, is one of the reasons. It's just a huge amount of money which is going into these places. So, for example, Indonesia, who you might have otherwise expected to have voted for this motion, they put in an application for well over £90 billion worth of a PRC investment in their country for things like roads, power stations, etc. And that is development assistance with strings attached. Everybody knows that Indonesia is going to be in trouble unless they do China's bidding through institutions like the Human Rights Council. So that would be the received wisdom. It's very difficult for those nations who are reliant, dependent upon China for money. It's very difficult for them to stand up to the PRC in those kinds of fora.
Now, before the vote, China also warned that it would set a precedent for examining other countries' human rights records. How much of a role did that play in so many countries either voting against it or abstaining?
I think this is just the kind of rhetoric that we've seen from the PRC and its wolf warrior diplomats over the last few years. I don't think it means very much at all. I think they were just deploying it as an argument to try to prevent themselves from being held to account, which they've successfully done, sadly. I don't think there's much in that. And what this really shows us is about hard cash independency and how, if we allow a nation like the PRC to develop its dependency to this degree, then we're not going to be able to defend the rules-based and human rights orders. That's the perilous situation that we're now in.
So is anything likely to happen now as a result of this report?
There are a few other mechanisms that can be tried through the UN, and I hope that they will be tried. For example, the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has a mechanism which can be tried, and I hope that that will be. But we're in a pretty difficult place, honestly. For example, we should have seen some kind of investigation for crimes against humanity and genocide in the Uyghur region. That normally gets referred through the UN Security Council. That's not going to happen because China's got a veto on the Security Council. So it just shows you everywhere you turn, apart from very few anachronistic areas, China has kneecapped the institutions of the UN, and that is a very concerning situation for all of us and should be something that democratic nations respond to with urgency.
Just on that point, activists have also criticised the motion because it stopped short of seeking an investigation. Is there any chance that such a motion can be retabled?
Well, I think that there are ways that it can be tried, but not in the context of Michelle Bachelet's report from the Office for the High Commissioner of Human Rights. So this isn't a dead issue, and there are avenues that can be pursued. But the prospect for success is very, very low, and that's the thing that has to be confronted. That's the issue which needs urgent reform.
And what does the Uyghur population take away from all this?
Well, extreme disappointment. I mean, they knew that they weren't going to get justice from their own government. It's not as if the PRC government is willing to listen to them and to adjust to their concerns. So they've been appealing to the rest of the world. They've been appealing to those who purport to defend human rights. And sadly, their cries have fallen on deaf ears because we haven't been able to make anything happen for them. So understandably, they're exceptionally disappointed and upset. But we can't allow that disappointment to override our desire to see justice done here. And I know everybody's redoubling their efforts to do what they can to see justice for Uyghurs and other persecuted minorities in China.
Luke de Pulford, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.